The following program contains content that may not be suitable for children. Parental discretion is advised.
Help women save lives and peacefully end abortion where you live.
I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired.
You were serious about that?
Be inspired to change hearts and minds by joining over 1 million volunteers taking part in the global movement happening in your neighborhood.
She says, pray that I can get through this abortion. And I said, oh, no. So she went ahead and went into the abortion clinic. And she just came out. She told us, I'm not going to get the abortion. We just had a baby saved. If we had a baby saved in Memphis today, praise the Lord.
This is the 40 Days for Life podcast with your host, Sean Carney.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the 40 Days for Life podcast. I'm Sean Carney, the president of 40 Days for Life, and your host for this podcast, which is dedicated to helping you end abortion where you live. This is part 2 of the 4th-Trimester abortion podcast. Does infanticide happen? Isn't that something the pro-life movement made up? So in part 1, we talked about the history of it, where it came from, how long it's been going on, that in fact there are babies that are born alive that are left to die and have been for a while. We also cover some of the philosophy and some of the current abortion doctors that are doing that. In this one, we will cover the why, which will be insufficient to explain this. There'll be a lot of discussion about evil, but also some current modern day reporting on it in the media and some commentary from what we have seen from people, particularly during an election cycle around this topic. So this will be a little bit more current, but if you have not listened to last week, go back and listen to part 1, and then you can come back and listen to part 2. I'm joined today by Heather Gardner, who I'm introducing first.
Oh my goodness, I'm caught off guard.
It's the first time ever. See, the reason I never introduced you first is because
I'm less important.
you're a woman.
I'm a woman.
It's sexist. If we're going to get accused of being sexist, let's just live up to the expectation.
Go all in.
So thank you. That just shows that we read podcast at 40daysforlife.com because somebody wrote in and was like, well, he's never introduced Heather first. He's just introducing that old boy in the hoodie all the time first. Welcome, old boy in the hoodie. We got you sorted out earlier. You were really struggling.
Yeah, it was, I don't know, my torso was not screwed on straight.
We thought something's not screwed on straight, but we thought it was like where your collar was all messed up. It was like a minor thing, and then you brought up the word torso.
Yes.
And went like medical on us, like you had some horrible problem with the way that you're structured.
I need a torsoectomy.
Oh, that would be sad.
I think that's a sin. I can say that. There's enough banter for our 4th trimester abortion. Okay, so last time was really good. Obviously a deep, dark hole, but
Yes.
one that were needed. The reason this is so needed is because abortions go on, 3rd trimester, 40 weeks, the baby's born alive. And we mentioned in the last podcast, there's 2 proofs of this. Number 1, it's documented by state governments that this goes on across the country. Babies are born alive and they're left to die. Governor Northam, governor of Virginia, the pediatrician, he described it on the radio. But we also have it on the positive side, sort of from our point of view, in the good light, which is, yeah, babies survive abortion and then they live. And you have Gianna Jessen, whose abortion doctor signed her birth certificate, Melissa Oden. It's Claire Colwell, whose twin was aborted and she survived. It's awesome. So we have it on both ends, but the trend is that doesn't happen.
Yeah, they just say that.
It's
It's just a straight up lie. And it's difficult because I think we're so used to it's a misinterpretation. It's they're finessing the data. They're messing with the data. This is just straight up say black is white and white is black. And that's kind of a hard case to make because there's not much like expounding upon it you can do. It's like, no, that is factually incorrect.
This does make me really grateful that we have social media one good thing about social media is because we know that the mainstream media is going to continue to, they're going to continue these lies. And
by social media, you mean only Elon Musk and X, Twitter?
That's an important one.
Even TikTok and Facebook, you can somehow get by the censorships, but
What we're on YouTube, we haven't had any real issues with YouTube.
No, just a stupid disclaimer.
The stupid disclaimer, it's probably on there now.
Yes.
Kermit Gosnell was helping poor children in Philly, not cutting their heads off. I don't know.
But pro-life groups are showing all kinds of videos. I would say Live Action and Students for Life and March for Life are probably the top groups that are constantly putting video footage of either undercover videos or sonograms, live sonograms in the womb, showing fetal development, showing abortion workers, former abortion workers share their stories. Like, these are things that
David Daleiden.
Yeah.
He never got banned from YouTube.
Surprising.
It's amazing. I mean, it begs the question: what could you put on YouTube that would get you banned? Because from the culture war standpoint, we've put stuff out there. Certainly, Live Action and David Daleiden showing the workers negotiating Lamborghinis for baby body parts and stuff. I mean, I'm not trying to say YouTube's the greatest thing ever, but really we've had no issue. Tons of issues with Facebook.
We've been warned for 10 years. What are you guys going to do with your podcasts and your videos? And you're right. We haven't had anything taken down.
Yeah, and I mean, but it's one of those things where we know that Twitter is safe because of Elon.
But these are ways of reaching. We know that teenagers and Gen Z, this is where they are primarily, is social media. And if we can reach them through social media, since they're not watching the news, but even if they watched the news, they wouldn't be hearing the truth about abortion.
That's where some of the censorship is coming in. They're not straight out taking it down, but they're making sure you don't show up in the algorithms.
Yeah.
I mean, try to post something on Facebook and get anybody to pay attention to it.
Yeah, of course
Nobody
that still happens. The censorship still happens on social media, but it now we're having to make them work harder to censor it.
Facebook is totally gone with that. If you announce anything, it could be a book, it could be going to a campaign vigil, it's a fraction of who will see it versus years ago. And part of it is they want you to pay. And once they got everybody hooked on Facebook and then they started charging, like, increase how many people will see this, and what was free a year ago now will cost you. That's been part of their strategy. So, okay, so what we're going to cover first is I think what most people are thinking if you listen to the first one, and if you didn't, go back and listen to that one before you listen to this one. So we're saying they do abortions. Roe allowed it through all 40 weeks. They do abortions through all 40 weeks. If you survive the abortion, they won't give you health care. They'll let you die. It's infanticide. So there's an argument there of, and the problem is? Mm-hmm. So if the goal is a dead baby, why are we nitpicking that the baby dies at 39 weeks and not 36, or 36 and not 26, or 26 and not 8? So there's a consistency here that our lunatic boy, Peter Singer, would agree with, which is, but I mean, what about 3 months? Like, why don't you take the baby home and see if he or she likes their room and all that? You come back and we can euthanize him or her. And what's the problem with that? It's your body, your choice. It doesn't end when you cut the umbilical cord, And so that's the consistency of it.
Yeah.
And that's why for the pro-life movement, highlighting these late-term abortions, which can be overdone, but it's done because most people are against it. Highlighting the late-term abortions, highlighting the fact that they're for infanticide to show, quote, the extremism, the most overused word these days. That's why I don't have a problem with Bill Maher, who says, yeah, no, I understand leaving a baby to suffocate. What are you going to do, hand it to a mother that just tried to have the baby killed? What about the consistency of it?
And what did he say? We won't miss you.
We won't miss
you. I don't
you.
care.
We have too many people.
Which I think is what a lot of these abortionists think too.
Oh, there's no doubt. Yeah, there's definitely a playing God with God being a positive in their minds. Like, well, I'm helping the world, you know?
A culture that rejects God is necessarily a violent society. That's just, there's going to be violence, and that's what we see right now. Western civilization has turned its back on God, and we're getting bloodshed in many forms, abortion being the primary one, but many forms.
So the there's an abortionist that practiced and performed abortions for many years in Austin. Also happened to be the abortionist that would visit here in College Station occasionally, one of the few. The one that was actually featured in the unplanned film when Abby witnessed the sonogram-guided abortion. He was an orphan from Romania and had told our volunteers a few times when he would actually act halfway human to us that what he was doing was good. Of course, he told Abby these things too. What he was doing was good. It was for the good of society, and that because he had a crappy, to put it lightly, childhood of being an orphan in Romania, he's sparing children from that suffering, which goes back to what you said last episode, Steve, that we are more concerned with alleviating suffering than we are with alleviating evil, with getting rid of evil. And that's backwards.
No, if the primary image of our faith were Jesus feeding the 5,000, I think they just kind of leave us alone. Like the Amish have weird rules, and we just kind of ignore them because live and let live. But when we say like suffering is not the last word, it's not the end of the world, they can't handle that. They won't handle that.
Let's go back to this guy, because how many doctors, I think in general for all of us, if we have to say, what I do is good, there's something wrong. And particularly for doctors, do you ever hear cardiovascular surgeons say, like, this work is needed? You're like yeah, we're like a fat society. I get it. Like like, God bless Taco Bell, you know, for clogging our arteries. But like he doesn't have to say that. Oncologists at St. Jude's don't have to say that. And it's all personal. That is the most predictable conversation ever. And I've never heard this before. But that's so predictable. What I do is good. I'm important. This is needed. And I had a tough childhood. And it's just like, what? You know, and this is where abortion is healthcare and all that. It's a load of garbage. It's an absolute load of garbage. It's so personal for all of these people. And I don't know. It's interesting. I wish there was more of an uproar. There's not. Medicine has failed us on a lot of fronts.
Yes.
Besides saving everybody from COVID. I know Steve is appreciative of what medicine did for the world during COVID.
Yeah.
But aside from those heroic acts, medicine has allowed abortion to invade to where doctors like this can say this. And he could just not be an orthopedic surgeon and say that without people being like, what's wrong with you? You know? And orthopedic surgeons don't do that. They don't say, you know, I never broke my ankle, and so I really feel bad for those who break their ankles, and now I'm serving the broken ankle people.
It's such a bizarre thing. I don't know what this guy had to deal with in Romania, but don't you fix communism rather than kill the victims of communism?
Well, that's who was the guy in Canada, the abortion doctor in Canada, who was the Holocaust survivor. And talk about letting the injustice, letting the tragedy, letting the brutality win you over and convert you.
Yeah.
I mean, Romania, it was tough.
It
explains a lot, but it doesn't excuse them. But right when you said Romania, I was like, well, that's it. It's living under communism.
I just think that, like, forget about whether abortion is right or wrong. It fundamentally does not make sense to me to kill the people who are victims of something. Like, I wouldn't be like, hey, it's like the Iceland thing. We're going to eradicate Down syndrome by exterminating the people with Down syndrome. Why don't you, like, actually help the families that are dealing with this cross? There's a lot of things that go bad in the world. We don't have a perfect world. we're not free of suffering. There are all these different issues. So let's address poverty. Let's address domestic violence. Let's address all of those things. Why would you just kill the people who could be hurt by it?
But this is the contribution of modernity. We have the technology to heal the world, and we're going to heal it, boy. And we're going to alleviate suffering. And it's very dangerous. It's very scary. All of this stuff, we talk about World War II. All that stuff happened at the turn of the century. And you read everything from the 19-teens and the 1920s. It's all leading to powerful people telling a group of people that they can kill them. And, of course, the Soviets started this. The Nazis, I think, perfected it as far as its efficiency, which is we're gonna convince everybody that we're right. We're gonna round everybody up who we don't like, and we're gonna execute them, and then we're gonna do it at a mass scale, and that's very that's totally justified in modernity under the notion that we can alleviate suffering and build heaven on earth. And that's when you said when you throw out God, you're capable of violence. Well, the other way of saying that is when you get rid of heaven, you don't stop longing for it. Okay? You just want to create it on earth. And, this is the gift of the Flannery O'Connors and the Walker Pierceys of the world, where they take the dilapidated loser and make him or her the hero of the book because they're the only ones with common sense. Because they just know that they're pathetic and they're weak. They don't think they can make heaven on earth. They don't think that's possible. Okay. Jake Tapper from CNN recently, I think I sent you this interview, recently asked Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who's a great pro-lifer. Overall, I do want to say Greg Abbott did good in this interview, but this was an interesting point. He asked Governor Abbott in an interview, where do late-term abortions happen? People keep saying this happens, but no one can tell me where. That's kind of a common thing. Like, well, who's suffering? Where is this happening? So the answer for the listener is Alaska, Vermont, Oregon, New Mexico, Colorado, Minnesota, Michigan, Maryland, New Jersey, and D.C.
I mean, that's where it's legal. They'd say even in those states, like, just because it's legal, you can't prove that it's happening, as though we have access to all of the medical records of all of the women who are getting abortions in months 6, 7, 8, and 9. These folks, you sometimes hear them complain that we're like violating the woman's privacy by being on the sidewalk. We've had people fundamentally misunderstand what HIPAA is. Like, you're violating my HIPAA by being here and watching me walk in. We don't have access to the clinic records. If we did, then we'd point out exactly which facility in Alaska, Vermont, Oregon, New Mexico, Colorado, and so on and so forth are doing these. But it's a dishonest question because everybody knows there's not an answer. Like, tell me, where are kidney transplants happening and who's getting them? I don't know. I can't figure out the names of the people who are getting kidney transplants.
But for the apologetic, you're totally right. The apologetics part for the listener or the viewer is 9 states. That's where this goes. So where do they allow infanticide? Where do they allow late-term abortion? 9 states. If you want to be super dedicated and memorize them, you can do that. But it's Alaska, Vermont, Oregon, New Mexico, Colorado, Minnesota, Michigan, Maryland, New Jersey, and D.C. New York and California are on that also, on that list.
That's what's interesting is well, we'll talk about
it's
California
how the law is
bit,
written.
but-
No, I know what you're going to say. Okay, so I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry.
But okay, when you sent that interview and I saw that, I was like, oh, you're so full of crap, Jake Tapper, because you're friends with all these people. This is old news. This is not something that's like, wow, this is just not happening. Like, you all are supporting this. You're friends with all of these elitist politicians that are pro-abortion, just like you are. And then you have actually, quite frankly, we can point out the specific abortion facilities where they are happening in the specific cities, at least a few of them. And Kristen Hawkins has been doing this a lot more lately on social media. She'll get asked at some sort of indoor event where people are fielding questions and these pro-abortion people are trying to get her gotcha questions and she's got the answers. Or just on a college campus at a booth and people are like, they don't happen. And she'll pull out her phone and she'll call Dr. Warren Hern's clinic in Boulder, Colorado. And then they'll go through the list. Yeah. And she'll say, so it doesn't matter why I'm calling you. Like if I want an abortion at 29 weeks, I can have one. If I'm 32 weeks, I can have an abortion. I can get one. Like, you're not going to tell me I can't get one. No, that's fine. But we do need to ask you some more questions and we need you to come in for an, like, they'll say that. And then one of them was like, oh, but see, she didn't say you could get one. She said need to ask you more questions. It's like, now you're really losing the argument. Like,
and why can't we have an abortion at 32 weeks?
Yeah.
Because the phone call thing's happening. It's a big thing on Twitter. There's a lot of just random women calling these late-term abortion facilities saying, I'm 39 weeks, can I get an abortion? They're like, yeah, come on in. You know, but what's wrong with that? You know, and that's what, when you say you're getting angry at Jake Tapper because he knows, that is the difference that Dobbs made. So he would have never gone there. He would have said, this is precedent. This is the law of the land.
Yeah.
In a Roe world.
Yeah.
But they got to talk about abortion. So now that we're talking about abortion, we're saying, and y'all want it up to 40 weeks. And they're going, no, we don't. You're crazy. Where does that happen?
This is kind of like when Obamacare got passed and we're saying, hey, this is going to fund abortions. No, it's not. Well, could you just like spell that out in the law then? No. They were about ready to torpedo the whole healthcare law if they were required to put abortion in it, which they already said was not in it.
Okay, so after Tiller, which we referenced in the first part of this podcast, part one, I should say, last week. After Tiller is a 2013 documentary, and it stated 9 states do late-term abortions without restrictions. If third trimester abortions are happening in these places, then you can be sure the 4th trimester abortions are happening and have happened.
So 9 states 11 years ago.
I know.
And here we are now, and we're getting more and more states.
That's why you were mad at Jake
relaxing.
Tapper, because this isn't new news. This is like old.
He knows.
Well, go back to the Clinton administration. I mean, late-term abortion, you know,
well, on top of that,
in the 90s.
I think what made me even more frustrated is he's supposed to be a journalist.
Stop.
Right?
No,
and he's like,
no.
I keep asking this and no one will tell me. And I'm like, no.
I can't accept that. Oh, you're supposed to be a journalist. Like, what's wrong with you? That's gone. That's
gone.
That's
no,
like
I know.
People that were like, ABC was unfair to Trump. They were? That's unheard of.
No, it's not surprising. None of this is surprising, but it's just another point that I want to make. Like, don't call yourself a journalist and say, oh, I keep wondering this and I can't find the answer. I'm like, no, you can find it.
It's not rant worthy these days. It's not. It's just not. They're supposed to be journalists. That's over.
Yeah.
That's totally over. I'm not trying to like break your heart. I'm not telling you.
Oh, I'm not. My
no
heart's
Santa
not
Claus. But on this topic, there's
children listen.
That's what. Oh, yeah, if you have a kid listening to this podcast, turn it off right now. Oh my word.
We forgot to make that disclaimer before.
We did forget. We will do that when we get back. But yeah, that's what I go back. I know I was critical of Trump in the debate. I didn't think he did well at all. And the narrative, of course, you got to come up with something. So it's like ABC was unfair, but ABC didn't make him blow his like taking credit for the economy or talking about his record or for some reason diving into Haitians eating cats and dogs and just be total rabbit trail, or him just squinting the whole time and looking angry the whole time and all that. Like ABC didn't force him to do that. And I think we just keep blaming the media for everything. And it's like the media's corrupt, they're biased, and we know that. There's such a huge advantage in knowing what you're dealing with. And, even Trump said it was 3-on-1. Everybody said it was 3-on-1. He should be able to handle that. I mean, he's one of the most talented politicians we've ever had. Whether you love him or hate him, he has done a lot in life to where if 3 people are arguing against him, he shouldn't collapse.
And I mean, it's probably the case that nobody has done more presidential debates than he has, right? Because he's been the nominee 3 times now. Right. So we got 3 in 2016, 3 in 2020, 2 this time. no one has more experience with this. If you don't know that this is what you're going up against, there's really no, that's on him.
And I don't think he's done a good one since 16.
Mm-hmm.
I think 2020, he had the second debate. He was actually really good in 2020, but he had already botched the first go around. And this is, people love this who say we never criticize Trump. But you pointed out, and to me it was my gut feeling. It's a lot like being a sports fan. Like, we're really good. We beat fill in the blank. And then somebody tells you the team you beat actually isn't any good. And that was kind of the Trump-Biden thing in June.
He was like a D at best against Biden. It was just, it got no attention because Biden was an F minus.
See, I thought he was like a B minus.
Okay.
You're harder on him than that. But I had lowered the bar because I was like, you're just sitting there going, for both of them. It's really interesting. Let's go back to that debate. Like, the way we're so divided in our politics, okay, if you have Biden supporters and you have Trump supporters, they're both terrified going in for their own person.
Yes.
It's kind of interesting. And like, I was never, if you go back to old school debates, I was very confident in George W. Bush, but I was really young and I thought he was like the coolest thing ever. And he was an excellent debater, actually. He did very good. I never had any confidence in McCain. I had tons of confidence in Obama, in 2012. And then Romney had, I think, one of the best debate performances ever in that first debate, and then blew everything after that. But do you remember that?
Yeah, 2020 or 2012 is when the media really stepped up, like injecting themselves into the debate with one-sided or erroneous fact checks. And that's why we're now 12 years into the media teaming up against a candidate. And so you got to price that into the stock.
You got to price it into the stock, and that's why I go on. We'll get off this topic, but like, they're fact checking one and not the other, and it's like, don't we know and expect this? Like, is this that big of a deal? Like, it's me coming to your house in December and being like, Steve, it's so cold, and you're like, yeah, no, it gets cold, and it's like, well, you're used to it. I'm not used to it. I don't live here. And you're like, yeah, no, I know you don't live here, and you should have brought a coat. It looks like. I don't know. We should have a higher standard, I think. Okay. Oak Lawn, Illinois. Finally, she made it. I knew we were saving her. This is one of the most powerful cases, and she's just such a sweet lady and absolutely great early supporter of 40 Days for Life. Jill Stanek, the nurse in Illinois. This is the first time this happened. So she testified before the House Judiciary Committee about her experience as a registered nurse. She discovered babies being born alive and shelved to die in the department's soiled utility closet. Jill has been on the podcast, actually. Was she on our third episode ever?
Oh. It was way back. She was probably the first guest.
She was the first guest. So you want to put that in the show notes. We don't know what we say back then. You think the banter's bad
like
now.
A 25-minute show, I think.
Probably.
It's short. Everybody's going to be like, hey, this is back when the podcast was good. So she discovers these babies in a soiled utility closet. Here's her quote. I was traumatized and changed forever by my experience of holding a little abortion survivor for 45 minutes until he died. A 22-week-old baby who had been aborted because he had Down syndrome. If you have not had the chance to hear her speak, I encourage you. She's been on the speaking circuit for many years. It's very powerful. Go on YouTube and listen to her. Listen to that podcast that we did with her. But she's just a wonderful lady. So I want to say this all happened in like 06 or 05.
I can't remember. I just know she kind of came to fame when she called out Obama during the 08 election for his support of infanticide.
So what that came from is when he was a state senator, and she, before the state board in Illinois, testified that this happened, and he pulled her aside and just ridiculed her. And they voted on it in Illinois. And they all voted to protect the baby who survives the abortion, except for one person. And it was him. It was Obama.
I believe 4 separate votes. he voted against it.
He dug down. And that's when I was like, because I was like, Obama's cool, hope and change. He's going to kill McCain. Everybody says he's a communist. We don't know that. It's just, but how bad is he? And when Jill Stanek started sharing that story, she's not a crazy nut looking for attention. This is like she was kind of thrust into the pro-life movement because of this story. And it's very powerful to hear how he was just ridiculing her, and he voted 4 times against giving protection. And probably if Obama were sitting here, he'd be like, yeah, I've always been ahead of my time. I've always been the progressive, and he'd be right, because now they all vote that way.
Yeah, because at that point, even NARAL was not telling them to vote for it. They're like, yeah, we've always believed that a woman's right to choose has to do with pregnancy.
No, they backed their chairs away from him when he said that. It's crazy. He was more pro-abortion than NARAL.
Yikes.
I know. And Planned Parenthood, they didn't go for that either, because they were like, this is.
We kind of get into this a little bit in What to Say When, too, where we've got the chapter on the efforts to codify Roe v. Wade and how it all kind of goes back to that Freedom of Choice Act, which was so radical at the time, and Obama was going to usher that in, and all of this. A lot of the debate that we're having right now is kind of the seeds of it are sown in that first Obama election.
Obama did a lot. I mean, he created that which is the current abortion position.
Yeah.
I think we can say Biden was the most pro-abortion president ever as far as his rhetoric and what he did with the DOJ and what he did with deregulating the abortion pills and all that. Obama for sure would have done the same thing. But at the time in 2008, I mean, Obama was against gay marriage in 2008, but he was for this.
Because I feel like he kind of came in, he made all these big promises, and he didn't follow through on a lot of it. He didn't push the Freedom of Choice Act, even though as a campaigner, he said, this is the first thing I will do when I'm in office. He just kind of backed off. Yeah, it's not my priority. But I think it kind of planted the seeds for people who came later to be like, yeah, we should do all this crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why we see, I mean, to get back to the topic at hand, he was ahead of his time on this. Nobody was demanding that we kill babies after birth in 2008, except for him, I guess. And now everybody on the abortion industry side is clamoring for it, or at least defending it.
Yeah, no, and he was very good at basically charming everybody into voting for him, and Anyways, there's a lot there with Obama, but he was very, very bad for the abortion issue, that's for sure. Okay.
So what's not in New York, this next part is specifically talking about zero restrictions. So, and I was surprised to see that at least in writing. I know better than to think that they're following the law, perfectly every single time. But when you talk about Andrew Cuomo's 2019 Reproductive Health Act, it decriminalized abortion and dropped most of the state's previous restrictions after 24 weeks. But there was a line in there that said it also protects babies surviving an abortion. It defined the word person, and it says person when referring to the victim of a homicide means a human being who has been born and is alive.
Which is interesting. Is that wording still there today?
That I couldn't find it removed.
That's amazing.
I know. But things keep changing.
The word person is used when referring to the victim of a homicide means a human being who has been born and is alive.
Which is better than what Governor Tim Walz's removal of certain phrases and
taking away the requirement to even report it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that was interesting. What's crazy, too, is I'll just point people to our 40daysforlife.com website. Our attorneys have created some maps. We have a post-row map. So you can click on the individual state and see what the most updated as of July, I believe, is on your state. And you'll see that you might think that California and New York, because they're such radical states, that they're the most radical, but they weren't in that list that we read earlier because that list was specifically focusing on the 9 states that have no restrictions.
Part of that, correct me if I'm wrong, is because California and New York already had these crazy laws before the overturning of Roe, and the new language came in where once Roe fell, these other 9 states joined them by just saying no restrictions. And New York and California don't really need to do that. So they kind of look like they have more restrictions, but it's just sort of restrictions under the Roe part of our era. I think, because it's scary even to talk about this, because I think what California and New York are going to do is come up with some governor or politician will be like, and we're going to have the super supreme abortion law and try to sort of outdo these other 9 states. And that's what happened in Trump got elected. I know a lot of people lost their minds on both sides, but Trump got elected and all of a sudden we just had to like get giddy and crazy about abortion. So Cuomo did his thing. And if you remember, it was like in Illinois was like, and us too, and me too. And we're going to have abortion through 40 weeks and we'll do abortion through 40 weeks. Take that, Donald Trump. And it's basically fallout from the Kavanaugh confirmation. Because Kavanaugh was September, October of 2018. Roe v. Wade anniversary of January of 2019. 4 months later is when Cuomo did the abortion at all 40 weeks and lit up the Empire State Building. And then Virginia came out. They all are just like, yes. And, and then it's just kind of knee jerk. Okay. California is entertaining post-birth abortions in March of 2022. So this is a few months before the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Under California AB 2223, a mother will be shielded from civil and criminal charges for any actions or omissions related to her pregnancy. Let's stop there. So this is the opposite of everything. This is where Scott Peterson's lawyer needs to get on this. I mean, what if she's shielded from civil and criminal charges of any actions or omissions? So that can be drug use. That can be, could she just stab her baby?
Basically, anything that happens.
Anything that happens. Okay.
Because every now and then you see these cases where a woman is prosecuted for abortion because it's self-administered and she's not going through the medical channel, right? And so I think this is to shield that.
These actions include not only abortion at any stage of pregnancy, but also perinatal death. Perinatal death is defined as the death of a newborn up to 7 days or more.
What does that mean? Up to 7 days or more?
That's right. Up to 7 days or more. I know. Steve, why don't they consult you for the language in this thing?
And why don't they do 7, I guess? But
why limit ourselves with 7 days?
Why not word it and just say 3 days or more? I mean, so perinatal replaces infanticide?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, because it's not prenatal.
See, this is the kind of sentence of just people don't, believe us on this. And the only way that this is fine in this podcast, and we're just totally wasting our time, is for the Bill Mahers who are like, yeah, lay off of it. They don't want their kid and they want to kill their kid. So stop. What do you care if it happens at 40 weeks or 12 weeks? You think it's murder either way, right?
So did this not pass then, Heather?
Well, this was what was not clear to me, because at this point it seems like this was still in limbo.
Okay.
I checked this on, there was a legislative website that basically had updates about current statutes and things that are, I assume, bouncing back and forth between the courts. But that was the thing, is it's strange to find the final solution to a lot of these, because like I said, you can go and find some basic facts. So like if we're on our map on our website, it will say like California, the status of abortion is legal. The gestational limits is fetal viability, which as a doctor said in the one example we gave in 2019, said could be at any point. So what does viability mean? California is less restrictive compared to other states, as the state allows nurse midwives, physician assistants, nurse practitioners with the proper training are allowed to perform certain first trimester abortions and provide abortion medication, which is not medicine. The exception after fetal viability abortion is legal if a physician certifies that continuation of the pregnancy poses a risk to the pregnant person's life or health. Again, that means anything. Those typically aren't defined. There's no parental consent, and you can go to the California state constitution and the safety codes to look up the latest. But this was from the Reproductive Privacy Act, and so these are things that I think. As I said in here, it says it's entertaining that. This was prior to Dobbs.
Yeah.
I would imagine things haven't gotten more conservative, more pro-life
In California?
since Dobbs. Governor Newsom wants to be an abortion paradise.
Yeah, he said that,
So,
which is just bad PR for him.
so these are certainly not citations from pro-life websites. And it's just really crazy how much this is running rampant.
Okay, so this is the story from St. Paul, Minnesota. This is March. This is just this last March.
Yep. Really great story. Steve, you should read this one.
She was 22 weeks pregnant when she stepped into the Planned Parenthood of St. Paul. She alleged that the abortionist told her, quote, "We don't tell women this, and a lot of women don't even ask this question. But if we was to proceed with the abortion and the baby was to come out still alive and active, most likely we would break the baby's neck." End quote. After hearing this, the woman left Planned Parenthood and chose life with the support of our sidewalk counselors. We are so pleased to report that she and her child are doing very well. This is reported by our friends at Pro-Life Action Ministries. This woman continues, "The more I was telling them no, the more it was like they was trying to sell me something."
So this is the most powerful. This is March of 2024, even though this doesn't happen in the United States. But 22 weeks, if the baby comes out still alive, we'll break its neck.
Who says that? I mean, can we just say that?
No, here's where I'm going to refer back to. This is the difference in a post-Roe world.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can or you have to say things now that you didn't have to say. I mean, I don't know why they just couldn't say we take care of it or babies aren't born alive. Why don't they just lie to these women? But we break the baby's neck. I'm surprised at how the pro-abortion folks are using the word baby a lot now. Have y'all noticed that?
Well, they'll usually say, in a lot of those undercover live action videos, when they're interviewing the abortionist or the nurse, they'll interchange fetus and baby, but sometimes if the mother's using it, they'll say baby.
Yeah.
They'll say like, yeah, you'll go into labor and you'll deliver the baby.
Yeah. Well, Leroy Carhart, who we talked about in the last podcast, was a late-term abortionist, and he said baby and said it on 60 Minutes, and the reporter's like, "You said baby." And he's like, "It's a baby." Mm-hmm. I tell the mother it's a baby. And she's like, "You said mother." You know?
Yeah,
it's like,
right.
You know, and that's the consistency and the honesty. Okay, now for the next group, CDC and other citations. Okay, so abortionfinder.org says that an abortion procedure may be offered throughout pregnancy.
And this is a website that, unfortunately, like many websites, since the Heartbeat Act in Texas was enforced, they've been popping up everywhere to try to help women get abortions across the country, including abortion pills. So this is one website that abortion advocates are using now to help women find abortions wherever they are. And it literally says that quote next to it. It may be offered throughout pregnancy.
Well, and this next one is from the Philadelphia Inquirer. I'll withhold the year. Interesting.
It's important.
Here's the quote. "In fact, for every case that does become known, 100 probably go unreported. Dr. Willard Cates, an expert on medical statistics who is chief of abortion surveillance at the CDC in Atlanta, estimates that 400 to 500 abortion live births occur every year in the United States. That is only a tiny fraction of the nation's 1.5 million annual abortions. Still, it means that these unintended live births," there's a phrase for you, Unintended live births are literally an everyday occurrence. Philadelphia Inquirer, 1981.
So if you were to argue, if you're a pro-abortion person and you're trying whatever you can to dodge and make it look like this doesn't happen.
Happens every day.
Okay. Well, that was from 1981.
That was not from 1981.
But so you're
happens
saying
twice a week.
So you're saying that it happened a lot worse and it happened a lot more then, and when did it stop happening? Is what I would say.
Sure.
You know, and it's like, oh, but wait a minute.
We've gotten better at it. It's cleaner.
Yeah.
The abortionists have more trainings. We have technology now.
We couldn't quite kill with the same level of accuracy back in the 80s.
This Philadelphia Inquirer. See, you were on your journalism rant. Look, this is Rose, 8 years old. And we're at 400 to 500 abortion live births. There's a phrase. And what was the other one? Unintended live births. Are we the only species? I mean, do donkeys or squirrels, you know? This was about, you know, I mean, you're supposed to be born alive.
Yeah.
If you were talking about unintended live births, you are the bad guy.
You're the bad guy that is dishonest. Just say, look, abortion kills a baby. Sometimes they survive. That's not the intention. Mm-hmm. Okay. CDC, sticking with them. In 2021, 5,634 abortions were done on babies after 21 weeks. Unknown how many of those were born alive. That's according to the CDC.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not none of them were born alive. It's unknown how many of those were born alive.
Well, they're not. I've noticed that the more latest statistics, it's getting harder and harder to find that information. Like it's intentionally being scrubbed.
But
they know.
But post-Roe America, the good thing is we're talking about abortion all the time. The bad thing is we're talking about abortion all the time. So the information wars have begun. Mm-hmm. And they can just scrub it or say, well, it's unreported or we don't know. And that's going to happen a lot. And I think that's why you have Jake Tapper and all these other people saying, well, where does this happen? This doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
It should be noted, too, here, the CDC, they only have data from like 43 states, and the most pro-abortion states. Like we talk about Walsh refusing to report Minnesota data. That's the type of thing we're talking about here.
Exactly.
California, the leading state for abortion, is not factored into the CDC data. So the 5,600, it's a lot more than that.
It's a smaller number. We know it has to be a smaller number because it's not like it's just not happening anywhere else. Mm-hmm. And they're continuing to increase to pass laws so that these are not required to be reported any longer.
The previous comment says it all, which is 400 to 500 abortion live births occur every year. This is only a tiny fraction of the 1.5 million abortions every year, but it means that these unintended live births, and that's just it's why it's good, and we write books and we do podcasts and we do all this, but in the end, this is just pure evil. And that's why the center of 40 Days for Life is the spiritual battle. And we say that unapologetically just because we have to say it. I wish we could just go around and give arguments out of what to say when to. And people are like, that makes sense. I'm pro-life. Sometimes that happens, actually. It happens a lot. But it's much deeper and darker than that. It definitely is a spiritual battle because it is an attack on innocence. And it is just such a barbaric act to turn your childhood or your view of the world on someone who cannot defend themselves whatsoever. That's why in What to Say When To, we say the unborn is the most alone of any human in the history of the world. They have everything stacked against them, and including governments and parents and most people who don't even know they exist. And so it's a very important point. Obviously, a heavy episode, and last week was heavy also, but very much needed because I think it's so barbaric that when somebody's on TV and the ding-dong reporter from ABC says this doesn't happen in the United States of America, I think most people believe that because they're like, okay, we have abortion and we have late-term abortion, and that's kind of icky, but it doesn't really happen at 39 weeks, and certainly nobody survives and is left there to die. And I think it's a good thing to not want to believe that, right? And the fact is, we have to document that it absolutely does happen.
This is where we need the Republicans to get serious.
Yeah.
Because they're afraid of this. And you totally turn the tables. If you're getting interviewed by Jake Tapper or the ABC fact checker or whatever, where does this happen? She was 22 weeks pregnant when she stepped into the Planned Parenthood of St. Paul, Minnesota.
Boom.
It's over.
Well, and that's why, look, this is why we don't put our faith in man, but I get frustrated at a lot of politicians on both sides of the aisle and all that, but this is where it's legitimate to get upset at Trump for going on this stupid Haitian kick when it's like, you've got some real stuff you could say. Like you've got stuff and they don't have to answer for it unless you do. We're not up there debating, the pro-abortion, whoever. And that was a huge flaw. Saying as how the Republicans are still the ones somewhat clinging to the pro-life platform, much more so obviously than the Democrats. But I think on any issue, it could be war, it could be anything that's like personal to you, when you just see a candidate that's like, you get so distracted and there's real stuff here, and I know people do that they do it on immigration, they do it on, gas prices of the economy or inflation. And people are like, look, I can really barely afford my groceries. Like, I don't need you to go off on somebody eating cats, right? Or I'll be eating cats because that's how bad it is. And I just think there has to be, so well put, a seriousness to it, and that's the problem, I think, with the us and them politics, is that it's just about beating the other person up and not like really holding somebody accountable for their position. And, and at the same time, you could say, because Kamala kind of rolled her eyes, but let's say Trump went on and basically went through this podcast in 30 seconds, and she said, well, that's awful. I need to rethink my position or limitations on abortion. I didn't know that. I mean, she'd have won over, all of Pennsylvania, in a post-Roe America. So it's a little political rant there. So as a follow-up, this is a good time. We're in the middle of the largest 40 Days for Life campaign ever, over 700 cities. If you want a message of hope at the end of this podcast, go out and pray. Go out and fast. Use this podcast. Certainly share it with your friends. Use it as motivation, not as a reason to get depressed or anything like that, but motivation to make a sacrifice for the unborn, to encourage a friend, take somebody out. We got a couple of weeks left for the fall campaign. Take somebody out to a vigil who's never been, and certainly make a resolution to pray every day for an end to abortion, because the unborn need us to do that, and they need us to take action. So if you haven't gotten it already, by the way, order the devotional. Speaking of prayer, if you haven't ordered What to Say When To, please do that. If you've read What to Say When To, please go on Amazon and leave a review and a rating. It helps all pro-life books. We're very appreciative for the many people who have done that. But do something after listening to this to help those who simply have absolutely no voice but ours. So thank you, Steve. Thank you, Heather. Rate, review, share this podcast, and we will see you next time. God bless you.